Hey guys, today I wanted to go ahead and go over Popcorn and the single post with sidebar by Stay New England. So what we've got is to edit the single with sidebar template itself within Popcorn. And once we open it, we'll see the heading is wrong, so we have to swap out the header first and go back over to the same inline like we used before. So the first move will be to move over to that style header. Then we'll move on to the post content itself. So first things first, go click on the three dots and we'll go ahead and replace that header. And now we've got the header back in place again. So every template, when you do like a overall like a front page or categories, posts, pages, you'll have to swap out the header. I don't know of a more specific way to swap that now. So what we'll do is switch it over, make it with a sidebar. This way we've got the spacing, we've got the content itself in a sidebar like they have. Now you get to the fun parts of actually looking at how their data is presented and a chance to start aligning our stuff to match theirs. So first I'm just going to make the content 1000 just like we did on the front page, so that way it kind of pulls it all in a little bit more and gets it closer to their page because theirs is all running at 1000. Our width is coming in at around 655 for the content. If you go look at theirs, you're looking at about, I think it's, yeah, okay, just a little bit bigger, but it's minor. We could tweak a little bit and adjust if we get to that. Now we can go in and we can look at the actual individual columns that make up the two column layout. And inside here, it's easy enough to take a look and see how wide everything is. Now, for me, I'm typically like a 70-30 style person, so I try and do like a 30% width on the sidebar. Most ads are like a max of around 300 pixels wide, so anything that goes wider than that is just kind of wasted space. So we'll make some tweaks here because their font is definitely smaller on their title. And this is where you start doing the little tweaks to adjust everything you need to adjust. Back over to the example again, you can see it's date and by time, or date and by the author. So we're gonna have to tweak that whole subsection. And then they have the category above it, so we're gonna use that categories again, just to make sure that we have this formatted just like they do. Get that green color, get the uppercase. This way that data is there for us. There's a little bit smaller maybe, but it's a minor tweak if we wanted to adjust that. So we'll go ahead and switch to small. That way it's taken care of. Now we do need to have the post date and the post author. So now you got to think about how you want to organize it. Since it's already there, we don't need to recreate it. We can just kind of reorganize it. So they just have a date. So really we can just kill the first container. So we'll remove that part itself. And that way it'll just be the date immediately. And then you can kind of reuse the author section, the paragraph, and you can just change that over to the by column. So really what we're doing is just pruning off that extra stuff that isn't really needed to get the same look. So for these ones, you just change that over to by, and we unbold it so that it just kind of fits in it like regular text. Somehow bold came back again. So now when you save it and we look at the front end, you'll get the cleaned up formatting itself. So it's more a little bit of cleanup still, probably to get it a little bit smaller and not have it be as wide as it is currently. This way you just adjust. This appears to be something weird with Gutenberg itself, that we set it to small, but it's still not displaying the same small size that it did before. So it is small, but some reason the editor and maybe the front end doesn't shrink it. Yeah, that was probably a bug. So we can come back to that. I mean, there's no point in fighting it. We could give it a class and do it forcefully inside the CSS, but I don't think that's going to be the way to go, so I think we'll just go ahead and leave it alone. But the shape and size is there to match what they have. We can always tweak the font size if we want to get it a little bit more aligned with everything else afterwards. So then we can switch over and start looking more. So we know their title is much smaller, so we need to shrink ours by quite a bit. But when you start doing this kind of stuff, sometimes it's better to just change it for the whole theme. So like it's a little bit of a play here to try and see, are all their headings going to be smaller? And if so, can we just set it at the theme level so we stop having to make them change quite as often? Because otherwise you have to manually swap them every single time. If we set them at the theme level itself in the settings, then you just change it once. But you are trying to find that right size when you're doing it this way, so that it looks kind of on par with what they have. Once you're happy with that part, though, you can look at the rest and go look and see, what they have. I wanted to copy some more text just so that I can look at how their text aligns with how our text would align with the exact same text itself. And then personally, I always like to leave the disclaimer. I know there's some people who prefer to do less frequent disclaimers or only on specific posts, but I feel it's more beneficial across the board if it's there on every single post, because it covers you in case later you decide to add an affiliate link inside that post and you don't recall that you need to go update that one specific post. And then color-wise, I just prefer when all the colors stay within the main. So if that green is primary, I want it to be the primary color of all these different sections. That way it's kind of bringing itself throughout the whole content. So you look and see, even their H2 itself, yeah, if we look, it's H2. If you look at their H2, though, it's not that big. So really what we need to do is probably go figure out the overall scale of the theme for headings, as opposed to doing them one by one, because then you'll have to manually adjust them every single time. So what we can do when we come back here, though, is take a look and add some of those headers. So I like to have these when I'm looking at everything, so I'll give myself the different range of headers, especially in like a test. So I'll have like an H2, H3, H4, so that I can kind of gauge how it will look against the font itself, and to make sure you're making the right judgment call when you're making adjustments. Since we changed H1 to be smaller, the H2 shouldn't be bigger than the H1. There should be a hierarchy visually to how all those fonts work. So when you shrink the H1, then you more than likely need to shrink the H2, 3, and 4, and maybe sometimes even your text itself, because the text shouldn't be bigger than your headings either. So we go into settings and the styles, and we can set each one. So now we can just go change all of the H1s. And then for me, I'm going to set this H2 to be the same size as the H1. And then I'm going to shrink each one of these by one setting down to the base. That way, the H1 is up above everything, so it's kind of separated from the H2 in the first place. But then every other heading is distinguished from the rest. And then for the font, we'll just leave it as the actual base, because we don't want it to go much smaller probably, but we can increase the spacing a little bit between each line and just kind of give it some more breathing room. So there's how it looks now. So those headlines all work with each other and they work with the text and they don't look out of place. When you look at the paragraphs, you can kind of see what they use for the margin on their paragraph sections. So you could go in and further tweak spacing. I didn't find a place inside here at all when I was looking around to add padding below. So you would go in and typically custom CSS that. But you could give it where each line would get a better spacing that way. When I tried to just do line height, it didn't look the same way. What you want is that breathing room after the end of a paragraph inside the editor. They don't really cover that inside here. So now we can go back. So I want to shrink up this disclaimer. It's pretty bulky this way. It's done to basically cover any kind of need anybody would want, but it's definitely chunky. So I tend to shrink all this up and get it all cleaner, trying to take less space away from the page itself. So it pulls up a little bit more. See how it pulls it up and in? So it's kind of piggybacked up that against that featured image, but it's not hidden from the user, and it's not something that's going to distract you necessarily if you're going to go down and start reading the content. So then for the sidebar, you're just going to start purging out these blocks because they don't use these. So I'm just looking to see what size would work if I wanted to leave things. I don't really like it much because once you do this, it just looks... So I'm going to go ahead and purge the block itself. And not like the About Us is needed. If you wanted to, you could keep it and move it down. But I do like their form and focus on just getting you directly over to the recent posts. And I would even say functionally changing the latest post to be tied to a category like your buyer's guides or your profitable content is an even better use of that spot. So that way everybody coming to your site would be presented with some of your buyer's content as an option on a desktop at least. So just purge all these out. This way it's just down to kind of their latest post layout and then the post content itself. So as you're going through, you can take a look and see what they're doing. They've got a little bit of flair for their images, their author section. The problem with a lot of Gutenberg's blocks, especially like the author, is there's not a lot of actual options inside here. So I'm going to show you guys. I can only get it to be so close. There's really a lack of ability inside Gutenberg's author section. If you were to use something like Cadence or generate blocks, it would give you far better performance and control because you could pull in just about any section of text to put inside this box. Like currently there's just no way that I could see to just make social icons and everything. So I'm going to fast forward past this and jump over to where it's as far forward as I can get just so that you can understand. Alright, to make it through this, we're just going to fast forward. So I'm running at a 1000x forward on this section just so you can see me try a whole bunch of different ways as I tried to figure out if there was a way within the builder to do this well. I tried the popcorn theme about section. I tried creating my own. I tried editing things and stripping around things and trying to figure out how I could do it. And really just in the end, it's a lot of time spent trying to accomplish something that I don't think the builder currently has the ability to do. So I went and grabbed the text because I really wanted to have at least as much information in there as I could. So I had to go into the user side and then inside the biographicals to get that information. And that's why when you go look at the front end, we have at least these same pictures and data inside there. So you just got to go down, and then I added a plugin here. So you would want to do something like this, simple local avatars, if you want to be able to use your own media instead of the gravatar. And this has like no load at all. It just allows you to put any picture you want as the image for your user, which I find tremendously helpful when I want to be able to choose a picture, as gravatar irritates me. So now when you go back into your profile, you can just go down and actually change out that picture to anything. So we're going to upload that one that we just got from him. And then we're going to go ahead and plop that in for us. And we can crop it. I mean, it's a picture. So now when we go take a look, we can go into the post. And when you look, it's not as pretty. It's definitely not as viable as I would like. I don't think there's a one functioning way. We could rebuild this with generate blocks. I could probably do it in far less time than it took me to just look through all of these options to come up with no way that looks all that good. So after this, you can see on the front end, I mean, it's not that bad, but I wouldn't list it as a highlight of a high-performing block from this team. So I did switch up the color because I wanted to make it look the same. I wanted to try and get a look at what it would look like if I just cleaned up and thinned down the profile versus having the about the author and that admin name on the top and side. In the end, it's kind of a toss-up. I think that this fulfills its role without the fuss and muss at this point. So the single post is far less helpful with the controls within Gutenberg's default than what they have inside pretty much every other tool available. So now I just wanted to grab the CSS and adjust this image. That way we could make it round and look pretty like theirs does. I'll fast forward again until we're back to something useful. The code for the CSS will be in the description. So as you can see, I jumped around through this a bunch. I was trying to set the right width and round it off and try and get a match. But then when I did it, it made all of the avatars used even in the comments all too big. So I went ahead and went back through until I found the perfect match for the CSS, which I'll include in the description. But that way it fixed all the icons and just made that one custom one. This way it was just easier to make sure it was done and allowed moving forward itself. I'm not sure most of you will spend the time on an about section itself. I would still suggest highly, if you're going to do an about section, that you would go into another tool, plugin that has better blocks. I mean, whether it's Cadence or Generate Blocks, I'll put codes for both inside the description. If you get the pro version, they're affiliate ones, and I get a portion of that back, but I think most of them with free you probably do it. And then the pro just gives you some nice template abilities to reuse sections and reuse buttons and reuse cool things down the road. So now we're just looking at making sure size-wise, when we look, there's still 1,000 pixels or just under. So making sure that we are aligned to their standards itself. I didn't remove the blocks, but we can do some tightening up of some of the pieces so that it fits better inside. So when you pull these sections, you just want to clean them up because you want that pixel width, like if it goes to tablet, to not go to some different size. And then we change the width, so I made that 30%, and I'm going to switch this one over to 70%. Because you still want 100%. That'll make the content section a little bit wider. And you get some of that space back, but without it looking noticeably different. But you'll see that like the Rhode Island section is lower overall, so we can do a little bit of play inside these groups, finding where the padding is at. There we go. And we can clean up, take a little bit off of these and still leave a gap, but get some more width back, and then pull off of the top and pull ourselves up so we're kind of equal with the top of the content on both sides. because this way it reads like theirs does. See how it's at the top of theirs and it's at the top of ours instead of having that gap. So it's more about just trying to keep it clean and to maintain a view. And as you'll see, it's all together. I could paste in the rest of the content so you could see all of it, but for the most part itself, we are functionally aligned and looking how they look itself. And I'm going to go back because I'm now liking this other color that he used for that author box. I'm going to put it on the affiliate real quick. That way it distracts even less, right? Now it's a call out there, and it's a little bit different in color, but it's not a bright green, pull your eyes away from the content. But I'm pretty happy with this. I know we just did the front page, and it was like an hour long, but you're always going to spend far more time on your front page than you will on the content side. There's some more stuff I would probably do on the content side here, but it's more being picky and, wanting to adjust and maybe get rid of a sidebar altogether and just do straight content and, blow out content when you want to make a wider section for specific callouts to make it more unique looking. But as you'll see, I played around a little bit more here at the end. I felt like I could still tweak some of these little parts to get them exactly where I was wanting them to be. So when you're playing around, once you start doing build work, you almost never want to be done with it because you'll always see something that you could do better. It's kind of part of the penalty of this game, but it's why I have all the enjoyment, because you can make something super fun that nobody expects out of what looks very different when anybody else uses the theme. And this way you stand apart. Nobody knows at this point, if this was running and they came to this site, nobody would be like, I think this is popcorn, as their first thought as to what the site is. So to me, that's more than worth the time. I would also say, if you're just new, if you're in the first 6 months and trying to build content, now's not the time to go customize all this stuff. Get the framework in place, leave it mostly the same as default, and get to publishing, because publishing is where you get all your traffic from. And you can make the prettiest website in the world, but if nobody looks at your website, then it really doesn't matter that your site looks pretty. It took me a long time to understand to not spend my time making a pretty site, but to work on getting people to the site first. So that's my consolation 101, is to paying attention to what you're doing. Inside here, we've still got a little bit we could do. So when you look at these on the front end, it's starting to just align up to the very ends. But he's got a highlight on his menus and the search bar. In the end, there is no search bar within Generate. Nothing. Within Gutenberg, there is no search button. So instead, we're just going to go find the label, and we're going to go find where the color is for the hover on labels. And we're going to go ahead and grab that so that we can go ahead and make it a black color on hover. That way it'll look like theirs does. So in this case, we're just trying to grab a color, and we're going to basically pick one just so that we can make sure the hover, right? So there we go, we see it. When we hover, we get that color we want, and then at this point you can change it into an actual color code if you want to. And then we got to go add that into the custom CSS side, because it's what actually does that coloring for us. So if we publish and close this, now when we go through, we'll actually get that color when we are inside here. So this way it'll look exactly like theirs does. But this is the end for this one. I really wish that there was better powers to Gutenberg, but we'll have to wait until the next version comes out. Catch you guys in the next video.